Here is a monster. It wants to eat you. It's afraid of fire, it has a weakness, and if you're clever enough, you can kill it. That's ordinary horror. And buried inside ordinary horror is something deeply comforting. The monster came for you. You matter. You're the protagonist. Cosmic horror takes that comfort away. In cosmic horror, there is still a monster. It just doesn't want to eat you. It hasn't noticed you. And if you ever do end up in its way, it happens exactly the way you step on an ant on your way to the bus. This is a video about that idea, where it came from, how it turned into an entire mythology, and why a squid-faced horror from 1928 is still everywhere a century later. The man who put the idea into words was Howard Phillips Lovecraft. He lived from 1890 to 1937, spent most of his life in Providence, Rhode Island, made almost no money writing, and died at 46, largely unknown. But he wrote at a very specific moment in history. Consider what science had just finished doing to the human species. Geology had shown that the Earth wasn't a few thousand years old, but billions. Darwin had shown that we weren't the crown of creation, but a branch on a tree, and a fairly recent branch. In 1919, a solar eclipse confirmed Einstein's theory of relativity. Time and space were not the solid floor everyone had assumed, and over the 1920s, astronomers worked out that the faint smudges in the night sky weren't clouds inside our galaxy. They were other galaxies, billions of them. In under 100 years, humanity had gone from the center of the universe to a speck of dust on a speck of dust. On top of which, the First World War had just made it very hard to believe civilization was heading anywhere good. Lovecraft took that feeling, the vertigo of suddenly being that small, and turned it into a genre. Cosmic horror runs on a few fairly fixed rules. Rule 1: indifference, not malice. The entities in Lovecraft's universe aren't evil. Evil requires that somebody has formed an opinion about you. They haven't. They're old, they're enormous, and they're busy with something else. Rule 2: knowledge is the danger. In almost every other kind of story, the protagonist gets stronger by finding out the truth. Here it runs backwards. The protagonist is usually a researcher, an archivist, an academic, someone too curious to leave it alone, and the punishment for understanding is that you now understand. You can't put it back. Rule 3: madness is the correct answer. When these characters lose their minds, it isn't because they're weak. It's because a human mind that sees the universe as it actually is breaks. Insanity is a reasonable response to accurate information. Rule 4: it cannot be described. Lovecraft became famous and slightly notorious for calling things indescribable and unnameable, and for reaching for phrases like non-Euclidean geometry to suggest shapes that don't behave the way shapes are supposed to. The trick is that the reader's imagination beats a drawing every time. So who are these things? Let's clear up one misconception first. Cthulhu is not in charge. Cthulhu is closer to a priest. He's asleep in a sunken city called R'lyeh, somewhere in the Pacific where the geometry is wrong, and he dreams. When the stars are right, he wakes. He first appeared in a 1928 story, The Call of Cthulhu, and he became the face of the genre because he's easy to draw. That's essentially the whole explanation. Further up the ladder. Azathoth, the closest this mythology gets to a top god. Azathoth sits at the center of the universe, blind, idiotic, surrounded by things playing flutes to keep it asleep. On that reading, the universe is something being dreamed by something with no mind. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos. The only one who takes any actual interest in humans, and that is bad news. 1,000 forms, walks among us, and is enjoying himself. Yog-Sothoth, the gate and the key at once, co-terminus with all time and all space, Shub-Niggurath, fertility in its least pleasant form. Then there are the ones who aren't gods at all, just neighbors. The Mi-Go from Yog-Goth, the elder things, the deep ones, and the great race of Yith, who travel through time by taking over other people's bodies. Several of them built cities on Earth long before humans existed and vanished again. To keep track of it all, Lovecraft invented a book. the Necronomicon written by the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred. It does not exist. This has never stopped people from asking librarians for it. He also invented a map, a fictional slice of New England with the city of Aarcum, the rotting fishing port of Innsmouth, the village of Dunwich, and Miskatonic University, where the unlucky researchers come from. Now for the part that actually makes this mythology unusual. Lovecraft had almost no readers, but he had an enormous correspondence. The estimates run into the tens of thousands of letters, and he encouraged his friends to borrow his inventions. So Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard, the man who created Conan, Robert Bloch, who later wrote Psycho, and a handful of others started dropping each other's gods into their own stories. Lovecraft borrowed back. They invented new forbidden books for each other's libraries. The result was something that barely existed in the 1930s, a shared open mythology that anyone was allowed to build on. Lovecraft never called it the Cthulhu mythos. That was the writer August Derleth after Lovecraft's death. Derleth founded a publishing house, Aarcum House, for the express purpose of keeping Lovecraft's stories in print, and probably saved him from being forgotten. But Derleth also tidied up. He organized the entities into a neat system and introduced the idea of benevolent elder gods holding the bad ones down, which runs directly against the whole point. In Lovecraft's universe, nobody is on our side. Plenty of scholars treat Derleth's version as a misreading, but it's the version a great many later games and films inherited. We have to include this part. Lovecraft was racist, not merely a product of his time, unusually racist, even measured against his own era, which his letters make painfully clear. And it isn't a stain sitting next to the work, it's frequently the engine driving it, fear of the foreign, of mixed ancestry, of something in your bloodline you can't wash out. That's the actual plot of several of his best-known stories. The genre has dealt with this. In 2015, the World Fantasy Award replaced its trophy, which had been a bust of Lovecraft's head, and a run of modern writers have written straight back at him. Victor Louval, Matt Ruff, N.K. Jemmy Sin, Ruthana Emrys, several of them by handing the narration to exactly the people Lovecraft was afraid of. You can hold both things in your head at once, that the man had an idea bigger than he was, and that he was a man who is hard to like. So why is this still everywhere? Partly because the mythology was open from the start. The tabletop game Call of Cthulhu from 1981 turned sanity into a resource you can lose, and handed a generation of game designers a mechanic. You can see the genre in Bloodborne, in Darkest Dungeon, in John Carpenter's The Thing, in Annihilation, in The Lighthouse. And then there's the Cthulhu plushie. The genre's most famous monster has become cute. That's either cosmic horror's total defeat or its final victory. We tame what we can't comprehend by shrinking it down to something you can hug. But the biggest reason is probably that the feeling has become ordinary again. Climate systems, algorithms, markets, pandemics. We live in a period where a lot of the forces deciding how our lives go are too large to see and don't know we're here. That's cosmic horror in practice. One last turn, which Lovecraft himself would probably have hated. Cosmic indifference is only frightening if you walk around believing you're owed some significance. Drop that, and something else is left behind. If the universe hasn't made a plan for you, there's also nobody grading you when you make one yourself. The universe isn't thinking about you. Whether that's a nightmare or a relief turns out to be up to you.